Deep in the rugged mountains of southeastern Turkey, a forgotten artificial hill sat hidden for 11,000 years. Beneath decades of dust, he found giant, T-shaped limestone pillars arranged in massive concentric stone rings, built long before humanity possessed metal tools, writing, or wheels. It was a monument that structurally should not exist.
When archaeologists finally pierced its soil, they uncovered a massive array of multi-ton limestone pillars carved with predatory beasts. The people who built this architectural marvel were nomadic hunter-gatherers. But how could a fragmented population with no permanent homes organize a labor force?
Wanna know? You're the lady for the explanation.
For over a century, history textbooks shared a very specific sequence for how human civilization began. First, we learned to plant crops. That agricultural surplus allowed us to settle in one place, and eventually, the stability of a permanent settlement provided the resources to build monuments. Under this old model, a project on the scale of a stone temple was impossible without several mandatory prerequisites. You needed a reliable food surplus to feed workers, metal tools to cut stone, and wheels to move the weight. In 1963, when an archaeological survey team walked over a Turkish hill called Potbelly Hill, they found limestone slabs protruding from the earth. But because the surrounding artifacts belonged to primitive hunter-gatherers, the experts dismissed the slabs as a medieval graveyard. They assumed prehistoric foragers were incapable of organized construction. This rigid focus on the agricultural timeline acted as a set of blinders. It caused a generation of experts to walk right over a site that defied everything they thought they knew about human progress. In 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt returned to the hill and realized those limestone slabs weren't gravestones. They were the tops of massive, deliberately carved megaliths buried deep in the mound. This is what Schmidt uncovered at Göbekli Tepe, a series of complex geometric enclosures featuring T-shaped pillars that weigh up to 50 metric tons. These aren't crude blocks, they are works of sophisticated craftsmanship. Intricate reliefs of foxes, lions, and scorpions are carved directly into the limestone, demonstrating a high level of artistic planning. The chronological reality of the site is what staggered the academic world. It dates to 9600 BCE. At this time, the builders had no agriculture, no pottery, and no wheels. Göbekli Tepe provided physical proof that the foundational timeline of human history was completely backward. The monuments arrived thousands of years before the farms. To explain this contradiction, Klaus Schmidt proposed a radical reversal. The temple came first, and the city followed. For years, the site was seen as an empty cathedral on a hill, where nomads converged to build, then dispersed. But this presented a logistical crisis. Feeding thousands, quarrying 50-ton stones required a massive, centralized food supply wild game couldn't provide. This necessity likely led to the first experiments in farming. To sustain the rituals at the hilltop, these communities began the intensive cultivation of the wild grains growing in the surrounding plains. Under this view, religion and the human drive to build communal spaces were the actual catalysts for the invention of agriculture. After Schmidt's death in 2014, excavations dug deeper into the lower layers. Using modern analytical techniques, archaeologists discovered the empty cathedral theory was also incomplete. Mixed into the ancient earth were domestic hearths, refuse piles, and rectangular stone foundations, the remains of permanent dwellings. The site also featured advanced civil engineering, with bedrock-carved channels feeding a rainwater harvesting system to sustain a year-round population. The scale of food production was industrial. Researchers cataloged 8,000 standardized stone grinding tools and large stone vats used for brewing wild beer, proving that this was a functioning, permanent community. Göbekli Tepe wasn't a temporary stop for nomads. It was a permanent, highly organized settlement of proto-farmers from its very first day of construction. Recent surveys show that Göbekli Tepe was not a lone miracle. It was the center of a network called the Taş Tepeler, 12 contemporary settlements covering the Şanlıurfa Plain. At a sister site 46 kilometers away called Karahan Tepe, we can see a shift in the way these people identified themselves. While the art at Göbekli Tepe focused on the animal world, Karahan Tepe features 3D human faces emerging from the rock, and statues with visible ribs and fingers. These carvings look like specific individuals rather than abstract symbols. By depicting the human form with such unsettling specificity, these builders were moving away from the spirits of the hunt. They were beginning to place the identity of the individual and the human experience at the center of their collective narrative. These discoveries reject the old model, where civilization was just an economic byproduct of people accidentally dropping seeds in the dirt. Instead, we see that the desire to build monuments and tell shared stories is what drove humans to settle down and innovate. The stones were cut before the first field was ever plowed. We can see a direct line from this 11,000-year-old network to the modern city of Shanli-Orfa that surrounds it today. The ancient settlement patterns established here never truly disappeared. Göbekli Tepe proves that it wasn't the invention of the plow that created the organized world we live in today. It was the human imagination, the need to build something larger than ourselves, that forced us to stay in one place and invent the future.